Welcome, everyone. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here. Welcome to the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We have an amazing guest today. We got Michael D. Butler in the house. Michael is an awesome friend from Clubhouse, but he is also one of the biggest publishers out there in his space. He's actually now the CEO of the Mark Victor Hansen Library, which we're going to talk about today. He is the CEO working with Mark Victor Hansen directly. Mark Victor Hansen is one of the has the record for the number of New York Times best-selling author books, along with Jack Canfield. He has co-authored Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Michael Butler is now the CEO of his new company. Among so many other things, he also has his own company called Beyond Publishing. Mike, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so let's give a warm welcome from Michael Butler. Welcome, Michael. How are you, sir?
Hey, Dr. Finance, it's great to be here. You know, I met you during the pandemic, like you said, on Clubhouse, and it's great. Got to meet you in person in New York recently, and kudos on the show, the success of the show. You're getting a ton of views, and you got some amazing guests. So thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Michael. And yeah, it was definitely an honor to meet you in New York last summer. It was awesome. So Michael's been supporting the club for probably we're going on almost a year anniversary, Mike, pretty soon, a few months. So,
well, I've really admired your work ethic. You know, a lot of people will start something and they'll try it for 2 or 3 weeks to see how it pans out. And you're in it to win it. You begin with the long game in mind, and you think strategically, and I like that. A lot of the younger people that are digital marketers that maybe accidentally found some success, they don't really have that work ethic. So I think you've shown a lot of young millennials that it does take work ethic and perseverance to make it happen. No.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I have to commend you too, because I can say the same about you. One thing I noticed, Mike, you're really a mover and shaker. Every time, I'm like, all right, I got Michael figured out. Another corner comes around. I'm like, what? You're the publisher of that book too, or this superstar or that superstar? So you're definitely you move pretty well too. You're very strategic and a great business person. So thank you, Michael, for being here. Michael, to get started, can you do a quick 30-second just summary of what you do, and then we'll get into your story after?
Sure. I'm a global book publisher. People call me the Simon Cowell of book publishing. I've been called a celebrity kingmaker, and we publish credibility books that put authors, speakers, experts, business owners on the map when they're in career transition. Maybe they're wanting to become a paid professional speaker. Maybe they've taken a company public. Maybe it's a woman that's going to start a company and take her company public, and she just really needs to get noticed. For example, recently we published during the pandemic an Afghan refugee. She wanted to start a nutraceutical company, but she needed to get on stages. She needed to get podcast interviews, but she didn't have a book. She didn't know what to write about. So we ghost wrote a book for her that's put her on stages. She's based out of Canada. It's opened a lot of doors for her. So credibility books for people are what we specialize in. Dr. Finance.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, Mike. So I want to get into your story a little bit. Let's start from the beginning. Where were you originally from?
You know, I grew up on the farm in Oklahoma, and
Wow.
and I had big dreams. I was always outgoing. I was always gregarious. But you know, I lived in a small town. And even though I had big dreams, you know, a lot of times you're limited by your environment. And I can remember, because my dad was raised on a dairy farm in Oklahoma, he wanted to reconnect with kind of his roots. And so he bought a farm. And fortunately, it wasn't a dairy farm, it was a beef farm. And it was 9 miles out in the country. There were only 4 boys within a 4-mile radius. And so our summer times were spent after we did our chores in the garden every morning. In summertime, we could play baseball or go swimming the rest of the afternoon, but we had to do our chores. So my parents taught my brother and I hard work, discipline, you know, family values, faith. Those were always really important, but you had to work hard and play hard. As long as your work got done first, you could play. I don't remember having to ever miss a baseball game or a baseball practice in the summer because my brother and I didn't do our chores. We loved the game of baseball. We grew up with baseball, and so we always got our chores done. And we were blessed and fortunate that even though we were middle class, we weren't wealthy, we did save some money. My brother and I were able to save some money and buy a horse by the time I was 8 years old. So when school rolled around, I would come home, do my chores, And then I would saddle and bridle my horse at age 8. In fact, last night I spent Christmas with my 8-year-old grandson, and I was telling him that story. And, it's kind of hard for him to believe or see, you're 8 years old, but instead of coming home and watching cartoons or playing video games, you're actually saddling and bridling your horse, because if you don't ride that horse every day, he's going to forget how to be trained and do as he's told. He's going to run wild with the Mustangs next door. And that was part of my childhood, and I loved it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I had that upbringing instilled in me. The only funny thing about that we teased my dad on, since he grew up on the dairy farm, he thought he should wake us up at 5 a.m. every morning, because as a kid, he had to get up at 5 a.m. every morning. But that principle that he taught my brother and I, that if you're not early for an appointment, you're late. And so that's carried me through. I was born 9 days late, and so I've been trying to make up for it ever since. Dr. Finance. That's kind of my philosophy in business, and it's carried over, served me well.
So are you a late person or an early person when it comes to being on the meetings?
I'm early. I get there early, and unless there's, extenuating circumstances, I'm typically, and my colleagues and my team members will tell you I'm early.
That's awesome. Well, going back to your story, Mike. So 8 years old, you own a horse. That is incredible. And I'm an urban guy, so I'm trying to translate this into my brain. It's really hard, but how does that feel to own a horse at 8 years old? Like, that must have been like the greatest toy ever. It's like, wow, I got a real horse.
I had a horse, of course. And then, it was pretty amazing. Kids dream about having a horse. And I look back at the time, we didn't really feel like, I guess, that we were blessed, because my parents were savers. We were the last family in the neighborhood. You'll love this, being the doctor of finance. We were the last family in the neighborhood to get a color television, and so we had the black and white TV. In fact, as the youngest brother, my job by default, I was the auxiliary antenna. Mom would put the aluminum foil around the antenna. I would have to stand there 7, 8 years old and point my arm so we could get NBC a little bit better for the movie that night. And so I would stand there and watch my family laugh at the movie as I tried to make the picture clearer for them. So that's a little bit.
I'm laughing because I can relate to you. There's not too many people that really understand that pain that you just described to actually.
And falling out of the bunk bed. I heard your podcast about that. I fell out of the bunk bed more than once because I had the top bunk. But I tell you, independence has its price. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Michael. All right, so basically you grew up on a farm, and were you there throughout your teenage years too?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we were on the farm until age 11. Mom and Dad sold the farm and we moved into town. But we sold the horse, and my brother and I invested in a motorcycle. We bought a motorcycle, and that gave me that sense of independence and freedom. And I got to tell you, my brother, he studied hard, he worked hard, he was valedictorian of his senior class. Every day after school, he would come home and he would study for 6 hours. After his chores, after dinner, he would go to the bedroom and study until bedtime. I would be out riding that motorcycle. I never took a book home, but I got to tell you, books changed me, Tony, in the early days, because from 5 to 11, even though I was naturally outgoing and gregarious, I stuttered. When I went into kindergarten and first grade and tried to speak to kids I didn't know, I would stutter, and they would make fun of me. And so this naturally outgoing, gregarious kid, life of the party, I became an introvert. But the salvation for me during that time, somebody, and I don't remember who it was, gave me a book that was written by an 11-year-old when I was 11 years old. Wow. And I would lay out there in the pasture on my family's farm and look up into the sky and read this book. And it really changed my life. It taught me to dream again. It taught me to take ownership of my life. I would see the planes flying overhead, and I would say to myself, I would say to the universe, I would say, one day I'm going to be in those planes, and I'm going to fly all over the world, and I'm going to speak to crowds of people all over the world. Little did I know I was prophesying my future. I didn't realize then how powerful words are when we speak them from our heart, but those were the words in my heart. I spoke them out of my mouth, and I've spoken in 30 countries since. And so that has come to pass, not only for me, but a lot of our authors.
Thank you, Michael. You just brought up a really good point. So people who this is my personal opinion. I believe that a lot of people who go into either become a great author or become connected to the publishing industry in a way that you are, where you're, a great publishing company. There's some reason why we go the path that we do, usually starting from childhood. So in your case, would you say that a book saved your life, or really helped to recreate your life? In the case of the stuttering incident, would you say that would be one of the things?
Two things happened during that time. Not only did I get that book that changed my life, it taught me to dream again. It taught me to look beyond the present and to think about my future. You see, a lot of kids, because of their environment, they feel like they're trapped. They may be in an abusive situation. They may be in a poor environment. They may be in a low income or in a bad school or something, or have kids that are bullying them. But if they can remove themselves from that situation and imagine what their life can be like when they can start taking control of their life, and they can truly forgive. They can truly forgive God, their parents, the universe, whoever's bullying them, and they realize that they can take little steps to change their life. So not only did I get that book then, somebody gave me a list of powerful affirmations. I was 11 years old. I taped these to my bathroom mirror, and I would state these affirmations every day. They were empowerment affirmations that changed my life. But also I did learn the power of journaling. And I don't remember exactly where I learned the power of journaling. I think it might have been at summer camp, at church camp, or something like that. But just the power of making a positive affirmation of who I am, what I'm created to do, that I do have greatness on the inside of me, and to write those things down. And then if you'll make that confession, if you'll write those things down, it will become a part of your life. But to answer your question, Dr. Finance, about writing the book, 90% of things that are written will never publish. But what it is, it works for us. If you've ever been through therapy, if you've ever been through counseling, like I have, after I went through my divorce, I spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours dealing with my anger issues, dealing with my abandonment issues, dealing with my trauma and whatever, and learning how to forgive myself for the mistakes that I made to allow my marriage to fail, to reconnect with my kids, all of those things that so many times kill people. The trauma, the pain, the victimization, they live in the past. Well, writing that story is the first step, because sometimes in that trauma, they never admit to themselves that they didn't deserve whatever abuse was inflicted on them. And it doesn't even mean you had to be sexually or physically abused. We all have traumas. We all have emotional wounds and pains. They may have come from a parent, a grandparent, a school teacher, a coach, a sibling that put us down, but for whatever reason, we internalized it. See, Dr. Daniel Amen is a brain expert, and he says 80% of our thoughts are negative. Think about that. 80% of our thoughts are negative, but the way we rewire our brain is we write it down. That's the first step. We acknowledge the pain. For the pain to be healed, we have to acknowledge that. And there's some people in life that no matter what they go through, they say, it didn't hurt. And men are really bad about this, right? Because we're taught to be the strong one. Don't let anybody see you cry. We're stoic, and we say, didn't hurt. But you know what? It did hurt, and it hurt very bad. And it's not until we acknowledge the hurt and the pain that we can heal from it. So I say everybody should write a book. Not everybody should publish a book. And 90% of what you write, you'll never publish, because it was for your personal journey of healing during your time of that journey of healing. But if you're not willing to write through the pain, you can never share the gain that you get through that process. So I say, write it, share it. It's almost like that letter of forgiveness you write to the person that wronged you. If you've been to therapy and they say, okay, write that letter, you write that painful letter, and maybe you don't ever even mail it, but it gives you closure, and you're able to either tear it up, ceremonially burn it, throw it in the trash, and move on from that pain, because you finally acknowledged, hey, that did hurt. And I forgive myself for staying in that painful situation. And it's really more about me forgiving and releasing and moving on. So that's a long way around answering your question, but I hope that addressed it.
No, that's a great point. And going back to your story, it sounds to me that I have to add to what I just said. So not only reading, but also writing books probably have a huge impact to change your life, and other major authors and publishers. And I'm saying this because I will be the first to admit that's certainly what happened to me, and multiple times in my life. Reading and writing throughout my life have reshaped who I am. So that's why I can relate to you, Mike. And you're telling the story of how reading, starting from when you were a kid, helped with the stuttering. Writing later on helped in the case of divorce, to get these thoughts on the paper, to see what you're actually thinking. By putting that in front of you, what you just wrote, you can't lie to yourself. You wrote it, right? Like, and then it'll help you to organize your thoughts better and say, all right, let's write this better. Let's reprogram this better. Right?
Well, reprogramming is the big word, and all the psychologists and therapists will tell you that the power in confessing it and writing it down, depending on when this airs, tomorrow's we only got another day left in this year before we go into a new year. And you can have New Year's resolutions and goals, but if you don't write them down and make them a part of your life, they seldom will come to pass. But when you write it down and you tell other people what you're doing, it's like when I ran my marathon 10 years ago. I made a goal for myself. I'm going to run this marathon, and I posted on social media. 6 months from now, I'm going to cross the finish line, 26.2 miles. And then all of a sudden, I had accountability. I not only said I was going to do it, I went public with my decision. I had to do it. And then, of course, the other factor was I joined a running group. So there's something very powerful that happens when you set your intention and you write it down. When you look, I know you interview a lot of successful millionaires and billionaires on your show. We publish a lot of successful millionaires and billionaires. When you look at their life is very focused. They keep their life very, very focused, very minimalistic. They know exactly what they're going to do. Every 5 minutes of their life is mapped out, and it's all around their core values and their goal. And they weigh everything through the filter of, does this add value to others? Mine is to inspire greatness in others. Those 4 words, inspire greatness in others. If my 5-minute meeting or my 15-minute meeting is not going to inspire greatness in somebody else, then I don't take the meeting. And so I'm always looking at, how can I inspire more greatness in myself so that I can cultivate more greatness in others? So I remove the distractions. I look at the things I've written down every day. I say them out of my mouth twice a day, once when I get up, once when I go to bed. And then I also realized that I want other people talking about my brand story. So, I mean, one reason you've been so successful with your show on Clubhouse and your podcast is you're getting other people talking about you. And that's one thing I really want to talk about, because when I was 11 and we had that black and white TV, we eventually got a color TV, and that was exciting. But, you'll love this, being the doctor of finance. My parents never bought anything on credit. They never put anything on a credit card. If they didn't have cash, they didn't pay for it. Same way with their cars. They paid cash for cars. The only thing they got a loan on was their home. As they would upgrade their home, they would reinvest in a better home, but they would always pay it off quick, and they would always pay it off early, because that was their nest egg and how they were growing their wealth. But the thing I noticed about media was we only had 3 channels: ABC, NBC, and CBS, analog VHF channels. And they signed off every night at 10:30 after the news. They sang the national anthem. They had the Air Force fly over, and then they signed off till the next morning, 6 a.m. news. And, if you look now, we have thousands of channels on Roku, on Hulu, on Amazon Prime, thousands of channels of content streaming everywhere 24/7. It's so busy, it's so noisy, but there's no end to content. And so as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a leader that wants to make an impact in the world, we have to ask ourselves the question, how is my brand being told in the marketplace, and who's talking about my brand? How can I, as a business owner, control our brand story 24/7 globally while we sleep or while we are on vacation? it's important. Brand story is all about leaving legacy, and you've done a good job with it, packaging the Dr. Finance Live podcast, being on all the social media channels, but how can you get others talking about you, and how can you elevate the conversation so that you're not just talking about yourself, but you're getting others talking about you? And so that's kind of our mission. That's why we're fascinated. We're fascinated with books. My evolution into the publishing space was pretty incredible. In the last 5 years, we've published 620 books under titles under the Beyond Publishing brand, including one series that you're involved in, the 13 Steps to Riches with Eric Swanson. The 13 books in this series are based on Napoleon Hill's legacy book, Think and Grow Rich. And we're actually collaborating on each of the 13 principles in that book. And that's opened up a whole new family or community online and in person that we're networking with, we're collaborating with. We have people in the book from Australia, from Europe, from all over the US. And this is one of the books. And what we like to say, because I know Sharon Lecter is one of your mentors. And over the last few years, particularly pre-pandemic, I shared the stage with her about 5 times. And every time she would get on stage, she would tell the audience about the next 5 books she was launching. She was always telling you, she was always letting you know where she's going with her business. And she would always plug you into a free online workshop or webinar. She was always giving free content. She was always selling you her next 5 books. But then also, as a result of that, you could get involved in her masterminds, in her coaching program, in everything that she was doing at every level. So we want to think strategically. We want to think long-term, because a book, a $20 book, it's great to sell $20 books one at a time, but it's a lot better to sell $20 books truckloads at a time. And it's always better to have a coaching program, a workshop, a mastermind, a keynote, an online program tied to every book you do, because it allows you to monetize. And now, because I know your books have gone all over the globe, there's no more borders. It used to be that when you published a book, you would have to go to a retail store. You would buy it in a bookstore. If the book wasn't in the bookstore, you couldn't buy it. But now you can literally buy any book in the world, anywhere in the world, have it shipped to your home. It can be on your doorstep within 24 hours, and you can consume the content. In fact, you don't even have to wait for a physical book to come. You can consume the ebook and the audio book immediately. And that's a way that people can go to your website, watch your podcast, get plugged into your coaching program, hire you as a coach, all because of that book. They hear you on a podcast, and then you change the course of their life. And then they are bringing in 2nd and 3rd level referrals to your business, because they're like, hey, you got to listen to Dr. Finance, his podcast. He just interviewed Mark Victor Hansen. This is epic. And they share that interview, and it just begins to go viral. And I'll wrap up that segment by just saying this. 2 of my sons are chefs, Dr. Finance. I think you'll love this. And they both tell me, Dad, it's all about the preparation and the presentation. So when it comes to food, you and I are in New York a lot. I know you grew up in the Northeast. I love eating in New York, because we were eating in New York recently together. You can get any type of food you want. But at the end of the day, it comes down to 4 basic food groups. And I want to talk a little bit about this in the next segment, because if you're an author, if you're a speaker, if you're a coach, it all comes down to, if you're giving a keynote, it all comes down to the same 4 ingredients. It's all about the preparation. It's all about the presentation. It's all about the call to action, and what you want your reader, what you want your listener to do. What action do you want them to take? And you can truly change the world. You can truly make an impact if you're very focused and directed on what your call to action is.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. And we're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff in detail in just a bit. We're going to talk about the 13 Steps to Riches, Mark Victor Hansen Library, your publishing business. Let's just finish up your story first. So what happened after? When did you wind up leaving Oklahoma, and what was the transition like the post Oklahoma years?
Sure, sure. So I raised my kids in Oklahoma. I grew up on the farm in Oklahoma, and after high school, I went to Bible college and seminary. I wanted to go into ministry because I really loved speaking. You know, I was a stutterer as a kid, and I grew up on Tornado Alley in Oklahoma. It was a very famous spot between Oklahoma City and Joplin, Missouri, where there's still a lot of tornadoes in that area. And I wanted to be a meteorologist as a kid. My parents had bought me this weather forecasting kit, and I would go out on the farm, and it had all these dials, and it had a barometer, and it had a wind dial, and it had all these instruments to predict the weather. And I thought it was pretty fascinating. When I was 12 years old, I gave a speech in my English class. My English teacher, Mr. Kelly, said, first day of 7th grade, he said, okay, 6 weeks from now, you're going to have to give a speech in this class. And normally I would have been terrified. And most of my fellow students were terrified. They were not looking forward to that speech. And I was so looking forward to it because I had overcome the stuttering in my previous 6th grade year. I had grown out of that. And I was thinking, what am I going to give it? It had to be a demonstrative speech where you would get up and illustrate how to cook something, how to do something, how to change the oil in a car. And I said, I'm going to give a speech on weather forecasting. And every day I prepared for that for 6 weeks. And I got up in his class, and it was a short speech. You know, I think we had only 7 or 10 minutes each or something. But I'll never forget, it was the first time I got an applause. I got an applause in that classroom, and I realized at that moment, Tony, I said, I'm either going to be a meteorologist or a minister. Those were the only 2 careers I knew you could get paid to be a public speaker. And I knew I wanted to be a paid professional speaker. So, you know, as we look, and the way I evolved into publishing, so I spent 14 years as a pastor. And when my wife and I's marriage didn't work out, the kids were young. They were 10, 8, 6, and 4. And I could have stayed in ministry, but where we were at in the Midwest, pastoring wasn't that lucrative. And I didn't want to move to California. And I wanted to raise my kids kind of where we had raised them, near the grandparents. And I found the industry of network marketing. And network marketing to me was all about personal development. It was all about helping your team succeed. And I was very successful in that. I was in a health and wellness company, and then later I was in a technology company. I did really well. But one reason I did well is I was equipping my team, teaching my team to write a book, adopt a nonprofit, and get on stage and learn how to be a speaker. So I would host hotel events all over the country. I would sell out these hotel events, and I would be on stage. And what I found was the biggest way to make an impact in the network marketing industry, direct sales industry, or really any industry for that matter, is when you get the mic, when you get on stage, when you get the mic, instead of talking about yourself, you flip the mic. What I call flipping the mic is where you interview your top leaders. And if you'll interview your top leaders, it'll grow your influence faster. And I think that's one reason you've been so successful on Clubhouse and with your podcast, as I've watched you this last year, is you're great at this, Anthony, is you're always flipping the mic. You're not on your show talking about you. You're interviewing. You've had Les Brown on your show, Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Canfield. You've had some amazing people, Forbes Riley on your show, and many, many more. Is you're always interviewing people. And so what that does is, one reason you've had the biggest room on Clubhouse for last year is because you're featuring other people's stories. People love to be inspired by stories. In fact, storytellers are the ones that really change the world. You know, if you look at the history of storytelling throughout the world, you know, before we had books, before we had the printing press, you know, it was the the true influencers. When you look at some of the great movies like William Wilberforce, you know, in Braveheart, the way he inspired his team, the way he inspired his countrymen to fight for their independence was he would tell stories. And this is what your life's like now. And this is what your life's going to look like if we don't go fight for our families. You know, he was a great storyteller. And you can go all the way back to the caveman when they did the paintings on the walls. We can see through the hieroglyphics, they're just telling the stories about warring countries taking over, subduing other kingdoms. And it was all based on capturing the heart and mind of the children of what their life could be like, and they could live for themselves or they could live for others, serving others and inspiring new generations to greatness. When you look at what brought the world out of the dark ages, it was the printing press. The printing press that rolled off. The Bible was the first book that came off the printing press. What brought the Renaissance, what brought mankind out of the dark ages was the ability to read and the ability to read books for themselves, not to take everybody else's word for it. And we're living in an amazing and unique time right now where the governments of the world are trying to crush free speech. They're trying to crush people that are sharing the truth in different industries, knowledge, but they can't stop it. Knowledge is growing so fast, it's multiplying. In fact, some industries like nanotechnology, knowledge is doubling every month. And so freedom comes when we share our story, when we have the ability to read books in our own language, but most importantly, when you begin to syndicate that knowledge, when you begin to syndicate it, you can truly own the stage and be the expert. And Tony, you've done this so well for the last year. By featuring the experts on your stage, you become the expert. I tell our authors all the time, the best way to become an expert at relationships, finance, business startup, whatever it might be, mergers and acquisitions, you interview the experts that are already the experts in that space. You own the stage, you own the network. I used to tell our authors back in the 80s and 90s to write a book and to think like a publisher, but now I'm telling everybody to think like a television network. You want to think like a television network, and you want to syndicate shows on your network. It's all about the eyeballs. There's 8 billion people on the planet. And if you really want to make an impact, you create content, you syndicate that content, and you make it consumable 24/7 so people can find you.
Mike, I want to wrap up your story, but you made up a great point here that I can't dismiss. Question in regards to that. What you said is 100% true, but why do you think that so many major influencers don't do what you said? They don't go and feature other experts on their stage. Like, I feel like it's, from my experience with this, a lot of the people I'm putting on the stages and meeting in Clubhouse, et cetera, why am I one of the few that's doing this? Like, I mean, can't you take, how come somebody who is like either almost there, or even people who are already there and they're getting complacent, why don't they start interviewing other people like that are experts? Is it an ego thing? Is it laziness? Because it does take a lot of work to do, as we talked about earlier. You know, what is impeding the majority from doing this simple formula you just expressed?
Well, it's the competition versus the cooperation mindset paradigm. They're in direct competition with each other. So when you look at sharecroppers in the agrarian age, you know, my grandfather was behind his time because he was the youngest of 9 children. Both parents died when he was young. They didn't have indoor plumbing. He only had a 3rd grade education, but he died wealthy because he sold the dairy farm, and he began to invest in real estate. And so that what he figured out was, I need to be on the front end of trends and technology. I need to be where, not where, because, you know, he was in the industrial age when he was working in the agrarian age when the world had moved to the industrial age, you know, and right now we're past the technology age. We're in the relationship age. We're in the relationship age. And if you're not building relationships, you're missing out. There's plenty of wealth. There's an abundance mindset. I read recently that there's enough wealth on the planet. There's enough resources in the earth for every man, woman, boy, and girl, all 8 billion of us, we're nearly 8 billion now, to have $14 million. Think about that. Every child that's hungry in Africa, every child that's thirsty in India for clean water right now, there's enough resources in the world to do everything we need. But because we don't have an abundance mindset, a lot of times we're still living in that savage, barbaric way of mine versus yours, and thinking if you have it, then I don't have it. But there's enough one of my favorite books, I was being interviewed recently in California, and I mentioned one of my favorite books that I read during the ministry days as I was transitioning into business was Michael Gerber's The E-Myth. In that book, and I know you probably know Michael, and you've probably had him on your show, is he's just an amazing metaphor about somebody that's so good at making pies that everybody said, you should open a bakery. And she opens a bakery, but she doesn't realize that making pies is one thing, but running and scaling a business is another thing. And the way to duplicate that business, I recently got a chance to meet the gentleman that founded Outback Steakhouse with $37 in his pocket. And he said the thing that made the difference for Outback to go global was when he created the Bloomin' Onion. The Bloomin' Onion is what put them over the edge. It gave them the novelty. It gave them the thing that was so different that nobody could duplicate. And also the ability to scale in Brazil, the ability to scale in Korea. You've got to have something that's very unique, but you got to realize you're not competing against anybody else. And you're just providing so much value. He said they didn't do anything legally to protect it, kind of like Red Bull. Red Bull was first to market. They didn't do anything legally to protect that energy drink. And guess what? They still own 50% on the market on the strength of being first to market, even though they've got hundreds of competitors. They're a category creator. So be unique, be different. But I think, Tony, you're right. I think it is ego. I think, but one of the best ways, if you look at the truly successful, you look at the steel magnets from the Northeast, you look at Dale Carnegie, and you look at all the wealthy, the JP Morgans and the Chases of the world that were involved. They were known as the titans of industry, and they ran the Industrial Revolution. Ultimately, they made their wealth. J. Paul Getty, all these guys, from steel, and they moved from steel. They moved into oil. They were always on the front end of trends, and instead of competing, what Andrew Carnegie did is he bought up land on either side of the railroad, because he knew the land on either side of the railroad was going to appreciate the most because of the transportation coming through there. So ask yourself the question, just like the city sprung up on the waterways, right, for trade, ask yourself, where's the world going to be trading ideas 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or even 2 years from now, and you want to own the land. Best way to own the land is to feature the influencers, which is exactly what you're doing right now. I think why it's hard for some people is all they've ever dealt with is like in the retail world of owning the shop on Madison Avenue, but they've never realized that intellectual property, you have to buy that space as well. They've always made it about the retail space, but now in the digital space, it's a free for all, and so I think though, you're leading by example. People, if we want people to change their mind, it will hurt them in the long run if they lack that abundance mindset. But I think when you look at people that are truly blessed and truly wealthy, a lot of times, billionaires get a lot of criticism, but a lot of times the billionaires are the most generous people on the planet because they're creating jobs and they're very philanthropic. So I wonder about the same thing myself. I think it's a good question, Anthony.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. All right. So just to wrap up your story before we get into the next segment. So when you became a pastor, you did that for, you said, what, 11 years, 14 years?
14 years, yeah.
Okay. And then and you weren't doing anything with the publishing at that point. You were just strictly pastor. Right?
I was always an avid reader. So back then, I was always reading a book a week in the theology space and the self-help space, because as a pastor, you have counseling hours. So you're counseling a lot of people, but you're always speaking as well. I was speaking to 100 children every Sunday morning, 100 teenagers every Sunday night, and 200 adults every Wednesday night. So I always had to be coming up with new content to present in a presentation or talk that was age specific and appropriate to them. So I would have illustrations, stories, takeaways, call to action that was appropriate for that age group and for that season that we were going through. So I think it taught me how to be quick on my feet, how to prepare content. And quite frankly, during the pandemic, I taught a course that I've been teaching for 6 years called How to Write a Book in 60 Days. And so I said to myself, I've sold this course online for years. I think during the pandemic, since we've been so blessed, I really want to give back and help people. So I gave the course for free to over 100 new authors that were struggling with writing their book. About 80 of those 100 authors completed their book, and about 55 published the book with us during the pandemic. So it was a great opportunity for me. It was everybody from business, relationships, counseling, entrepreneurs, pastors from all walks of life, direct sales, and multiple industries that benefited from that program. So I was always reading. And then when I felt that I was going into business and I could see that I was going into business, I began to read 2 business books a week. So I was always consuming content, but I didn't have enough context in the business world to develop my own hypothesis. So like you, with the background in academia, you have to look at the whole global scale of what's topically written on that space before you can become the expert. And then you have to decide, basically pick a lane, okay, because finance is a big topic. How do you pick a lane? And you picked your lane and you became the expert. And so with me, it was putting people on stages. It was reading a lot, consuming content. My first book was called The Single Dad Survival Guide. It wasn't even really about how to write a book or how to be a public speaker. It was a very niche specific book that I wrote, in spite of the fact that women buy most of the books, women read most of the books, women write most of the books. But I said, I've gone through this divorce, at that time, it was 15 years ago. And I said, there's not a lot of resources for single dads. I think I'm going to put together a resource for single dads that can help dads financially, emotionally go through a divorce, and just put the resources in there for them. And that book's done really well. And it does well every Father's Day and Christmas.
And is that how you started to pivot into from pastor to writer to publishing? Getting into
that was one point where I really started to look in the publishing industry. I was consulting with a publishing company, and I was actually marketing. One of our authors in the space of direct sales actually wrote a book on human trafficking. It was a fiction book, and I brought that to a publisher. So I co-published that book with her, and she had invested some money on the marketing side. It was the first book that had ever been tweeted out on Twitter. So we tweeted out the entire book on Twitter. This shows you the value of giving out free content. And a producer.
How did you do that, Mike? Because you could only have 140 characters.
I know, right? It was very labor intensive on our part. I asked my programmer, I said, can you write this program? He said it'd be about $3,000. And at the time I didn't have $3,000. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to use Hootsuite. I'm just going to get up early and stay up late and schedule a bunch of tweets. I literally scheduled the tweets 140 characters at a time. Took about 4 months to tweet out the entire book.
Wow.
And about every 30 minutes, a new tweet would come out. And so Title Card Pictures, Aaron Hu of Title Card Pictures in Vancouver, optioned it for a movie and wrote her a check and optioned it for a movie. And so we got her in the news media, we got her picked up, and some exciting things started to happen. But I began to realize that the world was changing. And what I realized, hey, you know what? Because of the internet, we can market and sell a book. It doesn't have to be in this zip code, this area code. We can literally sell this book globally and find the reader. And, a lot of people thought the internet killed publishing and readership, but readership is up globally. It's just, how do you find the reader? Who did you write the book for? But I started looking at the publishing space and realizing then that very niche specific books could do well because people were searching Google for niche specific topics. How to retire early, how to blend a family, how to, start a company, how to get funding for your company. All those kind of niche topics could do really well if there was a book on that topic, particularly if it was something a lot of people were searching for on Google, but there weren't many books about it. We had an author from Poland. She was a doctor that had survived Chernobyl as a kid, had a lot of health issues, and she suffered with endometriosis. I think 250 million or 750 million women globally suffer from endometriosis, but the only books out there were medical textbooks. And she said, I'm going to write a book on living well with endometriosis, how to naturally treat it. And the book did really well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you, Michael. And actually, now's a good time. Let's talk about your book. So how many books did you write, and what are their names?
Sure. Well, like I mentioned, the first book I wrote was called The Single Dad Survival Guide. And the thing is, most men don't buy books. So we packaged that as a book that women could buy as a gift for the men in their life that were hurting, for the brother, for the cousin, for the friend that had gone through a divorce. So the Single Dad Survival Guide. The next book I wrote is called Bestseller Status, and it's a book on how to write a book. It's a book on how to do research for who are you writing the book for? What do you want the book to do for you? How to get global distribution for the book, how to go #1 on Amazon, and how to get joint venture partners to promote your book, and how to get global distribution. That book's done really well. It's helped thousands of people write their own book. And it's also brought us hundreds of clients over the years that have found the book that said, we just want to hire you to ghostwrite the book. And so that was my second book. My third book was really the first version of this book, called Finding the Speaker's Edge. It first came out called The Speaker's Edge, that we did updated and revised. Mark Victor Hansen wrote the forward for this. He said, memorize everything. Butler's coaching is amazing. And this book is turning your part-time passion into your full-time speaking career, speaking on stage, speaking online. We launched this book during the pandemic. A lot of our students that have read this book have become paid professional speakers. We show you the 3 primary industries that you're going to speak in corporate, in the faith community, and also we show you how to host your own events. You know, the biggest money is hosting your own events, but it's also the biggest risk, biggest reward. You know, right now, and you'll love this, Dr. Finance, you probably already know it, that $2 billion this year will be spent globally on professional public speaking. That is actually associations and event planners hiring paid professional speakers. And we show you the top categories that you can get hired to be a paid professional speaker. And the top 2 categories are safety, workplace safety, and diversity and inclusion. But we list all the categories in here. We show you how to get involved. We show you how to get on a Speakers Bureau website and how to pick a lane. We show you how to negotiate with speakers bureaus and how to negotiate with speakers on your speaking fee, how much you should be charging. And this book's helped a ton of people. In fact, in the next 8 years, that speaker industry is going to grow from 2 billion to 100 billion global revenue. Wow. So we wrote the book in a very timely way, and it's doing really well. The next book we've done a number of books. For example, we're in this book with you, The 13 Steps to Riches. And this book with Mr. Awesome, Eric Swanson, and John Kovach, his team, just a great team of people there. They've got a mastermind, you know, and you've got 3 of the books there. The first one with Dr. Dennis Waitley, the second one with Sharon Lecter. The third one that I have here is Jim Cathcart. And the new one that's coming out, called Specialized Knowledge, is coming out January 15th, and that's what features Steve Sims, and that forward is by Michael Gerber, who we mentioned. So he's got a number of celebrity authors coming out here: DC Cordova, Dan Clark, Alex Stern, Glenn Lundy, and the list, Laurel Langmeyer, Kevin Harrington, so John Osseroff. So all 13 volumes, you'll want to collect them. It's available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. So.
And the introduction is by Don Green, the CEO of Napoleon Hill Foundation, on almost every one of these.
Right? That's pretty big. You know, Eric Swanson has really strategically launched this series, The 13 Steps to Riches, because not only that, but they've done a number of book signings in California. Pandemic willing, we're going to be opening back up and doing book signings from Florida to England, even Australia, and all over the country. And so the fact that you can be a part of a book, you can get your own book out. Like I said, we've published 620 books in the last year, but recently partnering with Mark Victor Hansen and starting the new company with Mark and Crystal and Tom Black. What we're doing is we're featuring people in the Mark Victor Hansen Library. And this is where I think I want to end up, Anthony, because your end game as a business owner ought to be to have your own island, have your own destination place for people to land. You know, Richard Branson's got Necker Island, and you can go there for a mastermind, get your picture with him, hang out, and have dinner with him. And the whole ideal around that is your relationship never stops with just the book. You know, you listen to Dr. Anthony's podcast here, Dr. Finance podcast. He's got so much content. Buy and read all of his books, because even though he might tell some of the same stories in each book, it's for a different purpose. It's to take your business to another level. It's to take your thinking to another level. And the thing is, Dr. Daniel Amen said 80% of our thoughts are negative because we live in a fallen world and there's negativity all around us. The way to raise our EQ and our IQ and our performance is to raise our mindset by reading books continually. You know, the printing press brought us out of the dark ages, but if we no longer continue to take vitamins for our body's going to decay. If we no longer exercise, our body's going to decay. If we no longer get to sleep, our body, it's the same way with our mind. We want to be around people that sharpen us. We want to be around people that challenge us. So we want all of our content to be on our own website. You know, and here's the thing you got to realize, if you're putting all your content on one social media site like Facebook, you never know when Facebook might take your content down. You want to own all of your own content. You want to own all your blogs, and you want your content to be syndicated on multiple platforms. But ultimately, in the day, when I Google a New York Times bestseller, a lot of times I'll see that he's got a radio interview over here. He's selling a book over here. Here's an interview, and he doesn't have it all on his website. You want all of your content on your website so we can hire you to speak for us. We can hire you to coach and consult, do a workshop. People can plug into your evergreen content and literally buy your course while you're sleeping or while you're on vacation. And they'll be like, hey, I went through your 8 modules. You know, we have a course on how to write a book at michaeldbutler.com. We have a course on how to be a paid professional speaker at michaeldbutler.com. Tons of free content there. But if you decide you want to buy the course, you can buy the course, or you can buy the book, and then you can engage us at whatever level you want. You can say, this was awesome, I want the course, or this was a great book, but I'm not ready for the course. I'll come back next year. And you want to give people, even though it's those 4 food groups, it's the same 4 food groups, it's all about the preparation and presentation. Just because I ate yesterday means I'm still going to need to eat, feed my brain tomorrow. I'm going to need to expand my brain tomorrow. Tune into Dr. Anthony's podcast, grow my mind, expand myself, and make new goals for the new resolutions so that we can succeed. We can continue to succeed so that when we're gone, our brand, our message lives on. That's the cool thing about Mark Victor Hansen is Chicken Soup for the Soul. He sold 500 million books, you know, he's written a total of 314 books. You're going to never stop writing. 59 New York Times bestsellers, sold 500 million books. You know, it's still the number 1 selling book in Vietnam right now. If you go to Vietnam, everybody in Vietnam, I'll be in Vietnam in April for the book show. Mark is like he's like a god over there. So when you continue to write books, there's 4 types of people that write books. Those that just want to mark it off their bucket list and maybe do their memoir for their grandkids. Okay. There's those that want to write a credibility book, be like, oh yeah, he knew something about this topic. Then there's those people that write a book that want to touch a life on another continent, somebody you've never met. But when you meet them, maybe you'll walk on a plane someday and they're reading your book. Or maybe you do meet them at an airport somewhere and they start to cry and say, your book changed my life. And I believe a lot of your listeners are at that point. And Tony, if you got somebody at that point that says, hey, I just want a free consult, I've got a book idea, they can go to my website. I'll be happy to give them a free consult. One of my team members will reach out to them, give them feedback, and give them some options for their book on how they could get it out to the world. So that's my story. I believe your story can change the world, just like the printing press brought us out of the dark ages. You've got some knowledge that you've acquired or that you were born with. Don't let your songs die in you. Don't let your books die in you. I'm gonna publish at least 50 books in my lifetime, but at the same time, the bigger picture for us is we've elevated the platform is we will have thousands of people featured on the Mark Victor Hansen Library over the next 10 and 20 years. It'll be a timeless book. It'll be a book that makes an impact, and it'll be a book that gets featured and gets amplified, not just in the US, but around the world. So Dr. Finance, it's been great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Honored to have you here. So Mike, just to summarize, so you got 3 major books that you wrote on your own. You're actually the author. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have all these co-authoring books that, especially what we're doing, they're going to be 13 when we're done, right? And then you get it published.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've written 3 romance novels. 2 of them have been published, and we can talk about that another day because that's the fiction side of my world. And if people Google me, they can find all that.
Oh,
But
wow. Oh,
today
so
I
you
wanted to
got
focus-
5 books total that you authored?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. That is also, yeah, it's good that you're doing the fiction thing, getting into that. It's I think Mark described it as the other 95%.
In fact, I got to tell you, one thing we're working on around this, finding the speaker's edge, is we're finding a woman that's like mid-30s, that's in corporate, that's going to launch out and start her own career, start her own company and get it funded. And so she actually empowers, she either runs a speakers bureau or she empowers women to become paid professional speakers. And it's going to have 1 foot in Asia and 1 foot like in San Francisco. And it's going to be based on fiction, but it's going to be a very powerful book. And it's going to be kind of the fiction version of this, but it's going to feature a female heroine.
Ah, okay.
Mhm.
Well, that sounds very interesting. So we're gonna talk about your publishing business actually next. So why did you decide to start a publishing business? And maybe describe your ideal client as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, women read 90% of the books, and I got to looking at publishing. I was consulting with a publishing company, and I realized that basically somebody had an option when they completed a manuscript. They could either self-publish, or they could find a traditional publisher, or they could go with a hybrid publishing company. And there's a lot of moving parts in the publishing space. It's kind of like saying, I want to build my own house. Okay, how much does it cost to build my house? Well, it depends if you're building a house in Montana or you're building a house in La Jolla, California. Is it going to be on the beach, or is it going to be, 50 miles from the nearest town? So there's a lot of questions. How big is the bay window? What do you want to do with this house? Are you going to entertain people? Is it going to be built in Hong Kong, Shanghai? What world is it going to be built in? And what do you want the book to do for you? So there's a lot of questions. And I realized that a lot of authors had some confusion around that. If you've ever, you can buy these kits where you're going to build your own house, right? And they actually pull up in a semi truck and they drop all the, the 2x4s, and they come and pour the foundation for you. And really all you've got is a slab, all these 2x4s. You don't even, you're not a certified electrician. You still got to hire an electrician. And there's a lot of things you got to do. And if you mess something up, it's very, very pricey to fix a house that you've screwed up. And if it was me, I was the guy when my kids were young, the night before Christmas, I'd be in the backyard, it'd be snowing. I'd have my flashlight trying to put together a swing set for the kids. And I realized at 2 a.m., oh shoot, I put it together backwards and the slide's not going to fix. And so I'd have to call somebody in the middle of the night to come bail me out and pay them the holiday bucks to fix it for me before Santa Claus delivered the swing set at 7 a.m. So you realize that it's not a one size fits all approach, but readership is up globally. Finding your readers is very important. You can have the best book in the world, but if it's not marketed properly and you don't have global distribution, that's a big thing. And so if you're an A-list celebrity, your option might be different than somebody that doesn't really have a name of notoriety. But if you have 100,000 Instagram followers, your strategy is going to be different than somebody else that doesn't. So there's a conversation to be had.
Yeah,
so I decided there was an opportunity to serve authors with a hybrid publishing company where the author owned the rights. They got the same distribution that they would get with a traditional publisher. They made the lion's share of the royalties, and they had an opportunity to get on stage, and we would actually push them out on podcasts. So that plan has worked very well. And our average author does 3 books with us. So they keep coming back and they keep referring to us.
Who are some of the celebrities that you've worked with, Michael, that you've published your books for? Because I know you've have definitely published a lot of books for major celebrities. It kept blowing my mind too on my Clubhouse stages. I was noting earlier, every time I'd have a major guest and be like, oh yeah, I published a book, Michael Butler. I was like, oh, Butler again? All right, come on up, Mike. So yeah.
Well, some of the names that like we mentioned, Eric Swanson, then a lot of his celebrity authors there. We've published for Forbes Riley. We're publishing Frederick Penney. He is a billionaire, and he's the largest personal injury attorney in North America. We're publishing Mitzi Perdue. Mitzi Perdue is doing a series of senior romance novels with us that we will be selling and marketing to the senior romance market is the #1 market in the world, and it's women over the age of 60 that are reading romance novels. And it's very exciting because people are living longer, and they have money, and they want to meet people. And so we're optioning a lot of these books that we're doing now for Hollywood. So since we're ghostwriting most of the books, and most of them are fiction, we're actually have people on our advisory team like Ann Carlucci, former producer at Hallmark, that we're vetting the fiction stories through. We have 3 producers that have done a lot in Hollywood like her, and we're vetting all the stories through and then optioning some for movies. And so very excited about that. And we have them across the board. So we have other authors that you haven't heard of in 30 countries. We have primarily women. We focus on women. Women are about 90% of our market. And these are women that are doing amazing things. We've got, you'll be hearing more and more about some, because until we're ready to launch the book, a lot of times we don't announce, because we have a strategy around what we're doing with them in the media space. One of our authors, Sandra Spurgeon, was just filmed for the Today Show. The Today Show crew came out to her home in Plano, Texas, and that's going to be airing next week. And we've gotten our authors on CNN, Fox News, Dr. Phil, and Good Morning America. Jen Duplessis is one of our authors that a lot of your listeners would know. Jen Duplessis has one of the top mortgage podcasts in America, and now one of the top leadership podcasts in America. We ghost wrote her book called Tell Me I Can't. Tell Me I Can't is a fiction story based on a woman whose town is hit hard by the pandemic, and she comes in a post-pandemic world to retire because she sold a company. And the story is based on her, but it's fiction. And because of her networking and her golden Rolodex, she's able to resurrect the town and bring some industry back into the town and resurrect this town in Colorado, which is actually where Jen grew up, Colorado Springs. And so that's given her a lot of stages. That's given her growth in her mastermind and her coaching program since announcing that book launch.
Thank you, Michael. And the other question I have in regards to the publishing. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we have Jim Cathcart as well, right? I forgot about
Jim Cathcart actually is a co-author in the 13 Steps to Riches. We actually, on his 21st birthday, September 21st, we published his 21st book called Intelligent Curiosity.
With
and
Lisa
I know you,
Patrick.
with Lisa Patrick from Canada, co-authored. And I know you've had Jim and Lisa on your show.
Yeah.
Jim is a past president of the National Speakers Association and many awards. He's a member of the National Speaker Hall of Fame, and he actually trains high-level speakers as one of the world's top speaker coaches.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep. So, all right, Mike. So we're gonna talk about the Mark Victor Hansen Library. How does it feel to be the CEO of the Mark Victor Hansen Library?
Well, you know, I'm very excited about that. I think one reason they tapped me to be the CEO is I've done a lot of travel the last 5 years in every major city of the world where there's book shows, you know, Guadalajara, Frankfurt, Jerusalem, Beijing, all these cities, Johannesburg, South Africa, where we have book shows. And I realized a lot of the authors weren't getting represented. A lot of authors, even with traditional publishing companies, that weren't getting represented, that need to be represented in the catalog, but also need to be represented to other book buyers, book distributors, and book publishers. And so Mark is a prolific writer. He and his wife, Crystal, their latest book, Ask, I know you've had them on your show. We've had them on Clubhouse, and they're doing phenomenal. In fact, they spoke to 100 million people during the pandemic, where a lot of people unplugged during the pandemic. They chose to go live up to 5 and 6 times a day, being interviewed on podcasts such as your own, and really have impacted the world, and their sales have spiked. So Mark Victor Hansen, Crystal Hansen, they are a household name. And Tom Black runs the creative side of the business. We have 57 ghostwriters and editors that work on our staff. And then I lead the CEO team, where is the sales and marketing team, and then actually launching the book. So I interview the authors in our Dallas studio, and then also provide a platform. In April, we'll have the London Book Show. The day after the London Book Show, we have our event in central London. We're featuring authors on our red carpet from all over the world that'll be speaking and being interviewed by the news media. So It's very exciting. It's a very exciting time because for an author to get their book out to the world, there's never been a better time, and the world's waiting because people are leaving network television. You know, everybody wanted to be interviewed by Oprah, but listen, you can be Oprah. Why be on Oprah's show if you can be the next Oprah? Build your own network, build your own channel, and don't go after the traditional media because every month the numbers on traditional media are going down, and the streaming platforms like we're doing right now on your podcast, those numbers are going up and up and up. So when people Google your name, you want them to be able to find you, not on, you know, even the major markets like Los Angeles and New York, those numbers are going down. You want them to be able to find you being interviewed on other people's podcasts, webinars, and shows.
Yeah, what on that point though, Mike, what do you think is like Roku TV, all these new different types of TV? You know, what do you think is the direction for those? Does that fit into the statistics you just mentioned?
Well, it actually does. It absolutely does. It's still kind of the wild, wild west out there. I've been saying for years that the future belongs to those that get there first.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to own your lane. You want to own your lane early. You want to own your keywords early. You know, Michael D TV here, I've got a show called Around the World with Michael D. Well, on Around the World with Michael D, I feature shows like Jen Duplessis, Tell Me I Can't. She syndicates her show on JD3 TV. I syndicate my show on JD3 TV. So it's going to Roku. It's going to these other platforms. It's going to Amazon Prime, but I own the content. And since I own the content, I have it up on all my channels. It's syndicated through all my channels, through all my network, primarily on my main site, michaeldbutler.com.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to michaeldbutler.com, that's got all my syndication, all my media interviews, all my books, all my coaching programs, my calendar, and my links. So if somebody's starting a show, you don't just want to get on one of these platforms that's going to put you at, you want to monetize your name. You want to set up the podcast right. You want to set up the podcast so that you own the content. You want to make sure that the platforms you're syndicating to don't own the content. And there's some platforms, believe it or not, you know, early on, a lot of people got on Anchor and then they realized, oh crap, I don't own that content. Anchor owns that content. They can take it down or they can repurpose it. You want to own all of your content. And even if somebody is offering to feature your show through their network, you want to be sure that you own the content. And you want to be everywhere. That's the way you get everywhere. If you put out really good content and people want that content, there's all kinds of ways you can do rev share on the back end. But listen, even the traditional networks, Tony, you know this, they need content. They've got all this dead airtime to fill. And guess what? If you've got a product or a service and you're providing valuable content, they might even syndicate your content for free and you can just do a rev share with them on the back end. Mm-hmm. They might have you on at 3 a.m., but guess what? You'll still make sales.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Thank you. And we could talk a lot about this topic. It's such an unbelievable and relevant topic to today. Before I get to the next question, Mike, just to wrap up that last point. So you have Beyond Publishing is your publishing company. What are you going to do with that company being the CEO of Mark Victor Hansen? Are you still going to have both at the same time or
so the market has two options, right? So Mark Victor Hansen is the celebrity platinum brand. When you want a Mark Victor Hansen endorsement, when you want the exposure, when you want the impressions that we're giving, there's a number of new channels and additional channels we're pushing our Mark Victor Hansen clients out through. Plus, there's opportunities to share the stage with Mark Victor Hansen. There's opportunities to interview or be a guest on the Mark Victor Hansen show and in his library. But ultimately, it's bigger exposure for people that are ready for that. Not everybody is ready for that, you know, and the first time you're launching a book, you may or may not have the strategy, the budget, and the goal to accomplish all that initially, but you might. And if you don't, there's Beyond Publishing. Beyond Publishing is a mass market brand. It's a proven brand. It's a strong brand in the market. It gives you the same global distribution that Mark Victor Hansen brand would give you. We bring you to market quickly, just like we do in the Mark Victor Hansen brand with all of the efficiencies. But the Mark Victor Hansen brand is a little more hands-on, it's a little more platinum, and it's a little more getting to deal one-on-one with the principals, whereas Beyond Publishing is more of a done-for-you service where you're working with our team, and it's not so much one-on-one with me and the principals and Mark Victor Hansen.
And that's your personal company, Beyond Publishing, right?
Right,
How long
right.
has this been around for?
It's been around for 5 years. And,
Okay.
and one thing we're doing with the Beyond Publishing brand is we'll continue to take all of the authors' books and catalogs to the global book shows to give you that global exposure. But then we'll also be promoting people from within the Beyond Publishing brand based on their book sales, on their annual global book sales, and giving them opportunities within the Mark Victor Hansen channel as that opportunity arises.
Thank you, Michael. And speaking of Beyond Publishing, so let's get on to summarizing the 13 steps to riches. So Beyond Publishing, folks, let me see if I can get this right. Okay, so that he's actually the publisher of the 13 Steps to Riches book. You see that's his logo there. And there's the front page. Let me see. Do you have the okay, well, I don't see it on here, but so he is the publisher for this amazing 13 Steps to Riches book. It's 13 books that I'm a part of. Not only is he a publisher, he's also an author, co-author with us. So Mike, why did you decide to publish the 13 Steps to Riches? Maybe in 2 minutes or so, if you can explain the purpose of that book, let's get an organized conversation on that one.
Well, I'm excited about the 13 Steps to Riches because there are 13 books. I've been a fan and a reader of Napoleon Hill since I was a teenager. I'm in my 50s now. And I have ideas and my own stories around the stories that are in the book. Like yourself, you've been a follower and a fan for years and reading it. I still listen to it every year on my Audible. And I want to be a part of what Eric's doing. I love Mr. Awesome has got a great mastermind and he hosts globally the Habitude Warrior conferences. So he attracts some amazing global thought leaders and speakers, just like Steve Sims this time is a part of Specialized Knowledge chapter. And I knew it'd be a great network. You know, our friend Robert Kiyosaki says, the rich look for and build networks. Everybody else just looks for work. So Eric's done a great job in this series, bringing everybody together strategically. And we have this valuable online community and network, but we also have, it's produced a real friendship. You know, you and I met in New York, a number of people that are part of the book around the country as we travel, as we speak. We're meeting a number of these authors that up till now we only knew online during the pandemic, but we're meeting them in person. So we're sharing stages, we're sharing each other's podcasts, guest seats, and doing some powerful things together.
Thank you, Michael. And folks, definitely check out this book. We're working on. Well, I'm actually writing the. I don't know, Michael, but we're doing 2 weeks for the to write the
yes,
fifth
we
book.
are. We always got. Well, see, that's another reason I do it. I knew that. If you don't have a deadline as a writer, if you want to be a serious writer, I heard John Maxwell speak pre-pandemic, and he said, I've written every day for 45 years, every Christmas, every birthday, if I'm sick, if I'm in the hospital, every day he's written. And so he has 87 bestsellers, many of those New York Times bestsellers. And the way he's been able to accomplish all that is he decides, I'm writing every day. Well, I'm writing 4 days a week. I'm building up into the new year to write 6 days a week, but you've got to have a goal like that. And when you sign up for a project like this and it's due, you'll miss some sleep or give up some television time to make it happen, turn it in, because people are counting on you. It's kind of like when I ran my marathon 10 years ago. The first day I went out and I ran a block and a mailbox, and the next day I ran a block and 2 mailboxes and thought I was going to die and call 911. So I go to Google, I order some running shoes and realize I'm going to need to get serious about this. I'm going to run a marathon in 6 months. I joined a running group. So being accountable to that running group at 5 a.m. when it's 20 degrees outside in December, you decide to show up, because if you don't show up, you've let them down. And as a result, all 4 of my kids ran the last 3 miles with me. They stepped out from the viewing area. They helped Dad, their old man, get across that finish line. One of the proudest moments of my life. But I couldn't have done had I not joined a team. And that's what it is when you co-author a book with other people in this model. They're counting on you. You put your best stuff out there. And I always tell people, give the world your best stuff. Sometimes as an author, you're afraid if you give the world your best stuff, you won't have anything for the next book or the next chapter. Listen, it's the 4 basic food groups every day. You might warm up some leftovers, but you're going to go to the store and buy some fresh ingredients. We're going to start over every day. And I love it.
I like that a lot. That's really good. All right. Thank you, Michael. And just to wrap up on that point, so folks, definitely check it out. Here are some of the featured authors on here and Dennis Waitley. We got Jim Cathcart. I'm sorry, I skipped over. Starting from volume 1, so there's 13 volumes, one
Yeah.
for each step. In Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, there actually was 13 steps to riches. So every step has a celebrity author. I like to joke around with Eric. I tell him there's 14 celebrities. Well, 15, it will count you, Mike, right? So we got Dennis Waitley, we got Sharon Lechter, Jim Cathcart, Steve Sims, Glenn Lundy, in this order, by the way, Marie Diamond, Dan Clark, Alex Stern, Eric Swanson, Laura Langemeyer, Dory Cordova, John Asraf, Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. So, and plus, we got forwards on every one of these books, including an intro from Don Green, the CEO of Napoleon Hill Foundation. And I just made the connection for Michael Gerber for book 4. So he'll be doing the forward for that. Incredible line. Greg Reed, by the way, is 3 feet from gold. He's doing the forward for this book 3. Anybody I missed, Mike?
I think you covered it, and I think that's what's so brilliant. Nobody's put together a book series like this. Eric has been very strategic with the way he not only lined up the co-authors and the authors, but the way he lined up people that are doing the forward. So it's very strategic. Hey, something else we might mention, right about the time we were launching the second book and we were pulling our troops out of Afghanistan, tragically 13 young people were killed there in Kabul. And I really love how Eric honored the lives of those. Here's Staff Sergeant Darren T. Hoover, age 31. It's part of book 3. Yeah. And every other month when we launch one of these books, he's honoring those young men and women that lost their lives in Afghanistan. So, thank you, Eric, for that. We really appreciate that. That's powerful.
Yeah, that is awesome. I agree with you. I'm mostly an author type guy, but when I saw this project, I had to jump in because there's nothing else out there like this. This is incredible. Yeah. And honoring such a legend as Napoleon Hill, it's like
it's one of those classics that really has, it sold 200 million copies, and it's really a legacy book that anybody in the personal development space, from Les Brown to Brian Tracy to Sharon Lechter, will tell you that was the book that they first read in college or in high school or as a kid, that somebody gave them as a graduation present that changed their life,
And Mike, just out of curiosity, speaking of optioning for movies, I mean, when we're done with this is huge. We're gonna have 13 books. I mean, it's gonna look like a whole bunch of books from my left hand and my right. Like how is that a possibility to maybe incorporate that like another secret or something? And have these co-authors part of it?
Yeah, there's a number of ways that can be done. There's a few people that have done it over the years, and including several people I can mention, but you could Google them, and it's one of those books that will always be new. It's always fresh, and it is lived on through time. And it's also one of those. It goes to the example that Napoleon Hill was commissioned to interview these 500 people for this book. It comes back to my point is flipping the mic. If you want your story to live on and you want to create a legacy, instead of talking about yourself, you feature others. And so think about that. If you're writing a book, tell some stories, feature some other people, get them on the Zoom for an interview and include their story in your book, because it'll help your book go farther.
Thank you, Michael. And just to follow up on this, another quick follow-up question and to close out this, maybe 30 seconds or less. So we talk about why did you decide to publish the 13 Steps to Riches? Why did you decide to be an author in the 13 Steps to Riches book? And you've already touched on some points. Maybe you can summarize it in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll summarize that in 30 seconds. It really comes down to credibility and marketing. When you're part of a co-author book, the number one way to gain credibility in the marketplace is to be an author of a book. And then when you're a part of a co-authored book, you're leveraging everybody else's network, and it's co-opted marketing that you didn't have to pay for. So Dr. Anthony, you're sharing the book. People are getting exposed to me. I'm sharing the book in my network. They're finding out about Dr. Finance and your podcast as a result of me sharing the book.
Yeah, brilliant. And Sharon Lechter, co-author Rich Dad Poor Dad, she talks about power of association. So I guess that's right in line with what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so you might like this question. What does the future of the publishing industry look like? Maybe a minute or two.
Sure. Well, knowledge is increasing. We look at the developing nations of the world like India. You even look at nations like South Africa, even though they're industrialized already, they're knowledgeable. The number of people that have college degrees might be comparable to even the US, but new book sales are growing every year in countries like Korea. When we look at our book sales reports and you see that China, India, South Korea, South Africa, all over South America, people are reading now more than ever. And those are books in English. But when somebody's trying to learn how to retire early, improve their relationships, blend a family, those types of how-to books, people are asking questions. And it's all about the knowledge in their industry that's at their fingertips that they can find now. I like to use the example. A lot of people thought, and I think you might be some Italian in your background, right? And some Italian food. You love the Italiano food. I love it. I'm not any Italian, but I love Italiano food. A lot of people thought that Italian food delivery, pizza delivery would kill. It didn't kill Italian food. In fact, it just gave another distribution channel revenue stream. Guess what? We'll sell more Italian food if we deliver it, because you're giving me options how to order it on my phone, get it here more quickly. And guess what? You want to do that with your content because readership is up globally. And the sooner you get to market with your book, I say, listen, first edition doesn't have to be perfect. Get to market. Speed to market's important. You can improve the book in the second and third edition. Speed to market's the most important because you'll get the media interviews and you get the speaking stages because you wrote the book on that topic. 90% of the people that see that you wrote the book on that topic will never read your book. But guess what? They'll listen to the podcast or they'll listen to the media interview, and just because you wrote the book on the topic.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. And like the gym membership, probably 95% will buy the book, but never listen to it or read it.
Exactly. But
it's earmarked for some future time. Thank you, Michael.
Well, it also gives other people an excuse to talk about you. So when this book is on somebody's bookshelf,
yes,
we just talked about Eric and Jim Cathcart and Sharon Lecter. We've talked about them. So the point is, it's not enough for me to talk about myself and my brand. I need other people talking about me. So the best way to get other people talking about you is those books. And when I had Mark Victor Hansen on my Clubhouse, somebody asked him that, how do you get your book selling that you launched 10 and 20 years ago? He says, keep talking about it. You have people that keep talking about them. And you give them a reason to keep talking. And I say this at the new year, send out 20 free copies of your book to your closest friends. Just drop them a note, drop the book in the mail, say, hey, I was thinking about you today. I appreciate you. Happy New Year. You give them a copy of the book for no reason. They didn't pay for it. But guess what? They're going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Michael. All right, Mike, one more question, then we'll get into the standard question and we'll wrap it up. We're doing pretty good. Figure about a minute, two for each of these questions and we'll make good timing. So let's talk about Clubhouse. How have you been able to take advantage of this app called Clubhouse? You and I have both have done very well on there in so many ways. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, twofold for me, I think, in addition just to having a social outlet during the pandemic and connecting with friends like you that I want to network with has been great, is attracting new business. We've attracted 6 figures in new business since Clubhouse started. So we've met authors that wanted to publish with us that actually hired. So I think that can be said for a lot of serious business people that have been on there. But other than that, it's been a great training platform for us because every Monday night, I host a training with some of my co-authors and some of my authors that we've published and that are even self-published or from other publishing companies, where we feature authors, experts, and we'll feature ghostwriters, editors, and we'll also give feedback to those authors that want feedback on their book cover or their title or subtitle. And it's been a great community just to support one another as authors.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would never met Eric Swanson if it wasn't for Clubhouse. I would never met you. I mean, it wouldn't have been part of this 13-book series, and I got a movie deal and coming in the way, and so many other amazing things because of this crazy app. Like who would have known?
That's exciting.
So thank you, Michael. All right, moving into some standard questions. You'll like this one. Can one book change the world?
I believe it can, because if it's the one book you need at that moment, and there are a number of testimonies like that. I mean, one of our authors got on a plane recently and she saw somebody reading her book. somebody that's morbidly obese, we published Forbes Riley book, Eat, how to eat healthy and how to address what's eating you. It really deals with that emotional health that drives the overeating and the eating disorders. And so when you're desperate, maybe you've having trouble with a child that's depressed or autistic or something like that as a parent, when you're Googling and you're at your wit's end on how to save your marriage or how to save your finances or avoid bankruptcy or how to sell a company, I would say yes at that stage of your life. How many times in my life, in our lives,
Michael, you're frozen. Mike, you there? Okay, Michael, I'm going to pause this for just a second, Mike, until we get this fixed. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Another interesting interruption, but don't worry, folks. We always get it fixed. Okay, folks, we are back. So, folks who've been watching the Dr. Finance Live podcast, life interruptions always happen. Actually, the first interview I had on this podcast with Sharon Lecter, my mentor, she had the same situation happen in the middle, and I never really did these interview things before. And what happened? She actually had a complete electric blackout and came back and finished the rest of that interview on her cell phone, folks. So we're definitely no stranger to this situation. We had a little bit of technical glitch here, but we got it fixed. And Michael's back. Michael, you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great. I can see you. So let's play it out. I think it should work pretty good. All right.
I love that question you asked me about, can one book really change somebody's life? Yeah. And the answer is yes. And that's why you want your title to fit somebody's pain point when they're searching Google on how to fix something immediately at that moment. But books are also like vitamins for prevention. And they're also like going to the ER when you've broken an arm or you've cut your arm off. We go to ER when we're bleeding, we need stitches, or we need a broken bone fixed. Those are issues that are life and death right then, but they're also good for prevention, And so I was at my uncle's for Christmas, and he's 90 years old, and he's got 5,000 books in his library, and they're all first editions. And they're everything from author autobiographies of former presidents to self-help books today to Louis L'Amour and fiction. He just avid reader his whole life and loves to read. And he gives me a tour of his library every time I go over there, and he shows me the 7 or 8 books that he's reading that week. So one reason he's been able to be so vivacious, he does 100 push-ups a day, and he reads 2 books a week still at his age of 89, almost 90.
Wow.
And I think books are that way. If we look at books as prevention, but also as emergency, we can turn to the answers we need. I think a lot of times now with the internet, we turn to Google. Before, we had to go to the library and check out a book. And so hopefully you've got some books on your shelves, just like I read Think and Grow Rich every year or listen to it every year. It's one of my preventative maintenance books where I keep my mindset right with that book.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Excellent response. And before, not only we had to go to the library, we had to memorize phone numbers. now we don't have to memorize phone numbers so much with our cell phone. Michael, you there? Okay. So Michael, next question, is mentoring important? Who were some of your mentors?
Something growing. I've been very blessed and fortunate, even in my own family, being mentors. People in the world seek out advice from men. I'm very blessed to grow in a home where I had your uncle I told you about that's in politics, been amazing in the community for years. But I've also hired different mentors over the years. I mean, right now I have amazing mentors in my life, business partners. Mark Victor Hansen Black, who are amazing mentors that have mentored people around the globe for the last 40, 50 years. But I always have coaches I hire. I have different people that I see on a weekly, monthly basis This last year, I was a part of about 5 masterminds. This coming year, I'm just going to focus on 1 or 2 masterminds, but that's always been a big help for me.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Folks, we're having a little bit of technical glitch here. So it froze up, it comes back. So hopefully when this is recorded, it'll be all right. What role has networking played in your life?
Oh, wow. Networking is one of the most important things I've always done in every industry. You know, I've spent 15 years in the ministry. I was 20 years in the business community, and now in the startup space, working with a lot of startups, getting speakers on stages for the last 30 years and running a speakers bureau. Networking is the ultimate, because networking is where the power is. And I think now I know you're friends with our mutual friend, Ivan Meisner, kind of the godfather of modern networking and founder of Business Network International. And of course, our friend Bob Berg, the Go-Giver, has taught us how to network in a way that's mutually beneficial. And I think the rules are the same in the digital and social space. They haven't really changed. Is you listen first and you provide value first, and then you're able to ask for anything you want and pretty much get what you want based on what Zig Ziglar said, that you can get anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And I think that's the golden rule that still applies. That's really worked for us, and it's worked for our authors that we've been able to help over the years. And I really think, Tony, what we're seeing now, because the internet was young with social media, now it's evolving, and we're seeing that it's really is a small world. The world's gotten smaller and smaller with the internet and through the pandemic, that your reputation goes before you based on what other people say, that they've got the opportunity to check you out before they hire you or before they invest in coaching with you. And so that can hurt you or help you in the long run. So who you are online is truly who you are in person, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Thank you. Excellent point. All right, we're going to pivot into the financial aspect questions right now. So what are your favorite financial books, if any?
Over the years, I've read a lot of finance books. Financial services was a big one back in the day. The author's name slips my mind, but it was something we taught our kids young on how to save and how to invest, where they had a bank, and it was a 3-tiered bank where 10% was going to saving, 10% was going to investing. Of course, 10% was going to charitable contributions or a donation to a church. And then the rest of the 70% was what the kids could live on. So these color-coded banks were something we taught all 4 of our children. It's certainly how I lived my life, how I grew up. I remember my mom taking me to cash in cans when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I would collect cans in the neighborhood and around the countryside. And then I ran an ad in the newspaper when I was 15 for lawn mowing, and I got 14 lawn mowing jobs out of that. I'd save money for a lawnmower, but I didn't think that, if I actually get hired to do a job, I can't drive. I don't have a driver's license. I'd saved up to buy my dad's pickup truck, but I didn't have a license. I had to hire my dad, my brother, or my mom to drive me around and mow these lawns. So I've always been a saver. I've always been a giver. I've always been taught to pay myself first. I wasn't as frugal as my older brother. I would spend a little more of my allowance on gum and candy when I was a kid. But when I got older, I realized, and good for my parents, that they wouldn't bail me out. If I was $1 or $2 short on something, or $5 short on something I was saving for, they're like, nope, you're going to have to save your money and wait for that. And I think, Anthony, a lot of parents in the modern day want to give their kids instant gratification. We had to work for everything. And I think I'm a better human being because of it.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Any other business books you'd like to mention, or finance or money books off the top of your head, or Think and Grow Rich? Rich Dad Poor Dad,
from the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. Every single one of Sharon's books from the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. In fact, those so revolutionized my life on how to get on the right side of the cash flow quadrant to be a business owner and an investor. That really made a difference. And not only that, but my kids read those books, and it changed their lives. Yep.
That's awesome. Thank you, Michael. Okay. It might sound like a nonsensical question to you, but there's a method to my madness. Do we need money to survive?
Yeah, we need several levels. We need money that we can put away and not touch that can keep growing for us. So most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And if they're not saving and investing and for the future, they could live past, next week. And that's the sad case of where most Americans are. We definitely need money. Money is not evil. Money is good. It does good things. We can't do good things if we don't have money.
Thank you, Michael. All right. And is finance necessary for everyone?
It is the finance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think kids need to be taught more. College kids are being bombarded with credit cards, and they're coming out of college with student debt. And I think it's a poor indictment on our American education system that they're coming out. Too many kids, it takes them 20, 30 years to pay off their student loans. And I think we need to educate kids and parents to do a better job of that. And I think there's a better way. I think that system's broken. It needs to be turned right side up pretty quickly.
Thank you, Michael. Just a few more questions left. So next one is in regards to purpose, and how important is having a purpose in business? And the follow up to that is, what is your purpose?
There's a scripture in Ecclesiastes about finding purpose in your work, and it's the joy of a man to find pleasure in his work. And I think the most miserable life would be, apart from a life sentence in prison and having no, would be to have to go to a job every day that you hated. And I think when you look, and I refer to scripture some because I was a pastor, but if you look at the Garden of Eden before the curse, Adam and Eve, they enjoyed getting their hands dirty. And they didn't even sweat back then. Later they would sweat, but I still love sweating. I still love digging in the dirt. I love getting my hands dirty. I think there's something that's been lost in our modern society, and I'm always glad when I see kids that value work. A lot of my friends, I lived in the country. I wanted a paper route, but I couldn't do a paper route. But my school age friends in town that had 2 or 3 paper routes, they always had money. And I had to think outside the box on how to generate money because they always had money. And so you can do it if you think it and dream it. Yes, I think it's good.
And what would you say your purpose is, maybe in one sentence?
Yeah, my purpose is to inspire greatness in others, to help people find that sweet spot, that 1% of the thing they're good at. Quit trying to fix the things you suck at and just exploit the 2% or the 1% that you're really good at.
Very, very good. Thank you, Michael. 2 more questions left. What would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so?
Yeah, to travel to 100 nations, to speak in 100 nations, and to meet our authors in 100 nations. And, all total, I may hit all 190 nations. That changes from week to week on how many actual there are, but there's about 100 nations. And I want to go to at least 100 of those nations to speak and to empower and to give away our books and to meet our authors all over the world.
Sounds good, Mike. And I'd love to join you one day because that's a mission, a goal I have too. I'm a big traveler, but doing what you're doing, I find that very commendable. So.
One of the most rewarding things of this year was in April this year, we took 2 of our authors and they spoke in Pakistan at a women's conference to thousands of women and empowering women. And that's a country where women typically aren't allowed to own businesses and start companies, but it was very powerful for the there, and it was very exciting to see that happen. And we'll be doing a lot more of that moving forward.
Thank you, Michael. All right, last question. What would you like to be your legacy to this world? What do you want to leave as your legacy?
Well, when I'm gone, I want not only my children, but I want people that I never met, lives to be changed, for them to see themselves living out my story. We talked about the cash flow quadrant that Sharon Lechter created with Robert Kiyosaki, and I could see myself as I read those books moving from the left to the right side of the cash flow quadrant. And I've met millions of millennials that dream of being ballers someday and changing the world because they get it. They want to be a B or an I, a business owner or investor. And guess what? Those people Sharon Lechter will never meet, but she's impacted so many of those young people that are going to impact the world in a positive way. And that's what I want people around the world to be inspired by the stories that are in our authors' books.
Thank you, Michael. All right, Michael, I appreciate you being here. I really do. And Clubhouse, we're going to be running hopefully some very incredible stages together in the future. I'd like to leave the floor to you to basically plug your books or anything you want to talk about, where they can find more information about you. Anything you want at all. The stage is yours, Michael.
Well, Dr. Finance has been so much fun. I've had so much fun following you this last year throughout the dark, dreary days of the pandemic. You've brought so much light to people all over the world, literally hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions of people.
Millions, yeah.
Millions of people when you do the numbers, because I know you're a numbers guy being Dr. Finance, and many a late night, many an early morning that you through the night have been hosting Clubhouse rooms, and the Dr. Finance live podcast is changing so many lives because you've been giving enough, you've paid it forward enough to be a go-giver and to share the stage and to give up your stage and to feature some amazing stories on your stages. So everything that we've got is at michaeldbutler.com. We've got free content there. You can get free videos on how to be a speaking gigs, Rotary clubs, how to get speaking gigs, how to launch your speaking career. Ton of free content there. We've course around that. We've got the book grab, finding the it's available in every format, starting at $1 all the way up to hardcovers, whatever you want. If you've got a book idea, you can jump on my calendar, mention you met me through finance, and I'll do a free coaching session around your book title, and your book. So everything Michael Butler is there. There's also credibility.live. You can link from Michael D. Butler. It's the course on how to write a book. It helped thousands of people. Book. You can get it from $1. You can spend up to $49 and get all the video training modules. So check that out. And I'm happy to help. And I'm really happy to see you in the coming year. I think you want to create a brand that's going to touch people's lives. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we need to find your unique thumbprint, your unique call, your core values, and this special message, that 1% difference that you're going to bring to the world. Somebody's heard and somebody's waiting to hear that story. We want to help you bring that to the world. And I can't wait to meet you. Thank you, Dr. Finance, for having me on. It's been epic. And you bet we're going to be on those stages together.
That is awesome.
You're going to be speaking with me all Asia and all over the world, my friend.
All right. Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. Thank you, Michael. Again, I want to thank you for being here, and it's such an honor to have you here. And congrats again on the new partnership venture with Mark Victor Hansen Library, the CEO. So folks, definitely give that a check out. Mike, what is your social media link again? Like, you're all over social media, right?
I'm all over social. If you go to michaeldbutler.com, you can find the link to Mark Victor Hansen Library.
Okay, Mike, are you there? All right, Michael's screen looks like it's frozen, folks. So I'm going to just conclude. Thank you again, Michael. I appreciate you being here, and I want to get this recording locked in here. Make sure we preserve our valuable time. Michael, unbelievable. Thank you for being here so much, and we're going to look forward to seeing you on the next Clubhouse stages. So, Michael, thanks again, folks. Thanks for listening here. Appreciate you all so much on such another fantastic episode. And I want to just let you know, so if you want to get more information, go to drfinance.info. I got all my podcast information on there. All right, so you got the podcast information, you got information about everything you want, drfinance.info. Michael Butler's back. So Michael, all right, we're just concluding here. Any last minute thoughts, Mike, before I go forward and close out? You're muted.
That was the funnest interview I've done all year. Thank you, Dr. Finance. It was epic.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. So, folks, again, drfinance.info on the window. And if you want to get some information about my books, I have my first book, The Necessity of Finance, I wrote about 10 years ago for my finance students as a university professor. And then the most important lessons in economics and finance. And then, of course, the final book I had was The Survival of the Rich, is about 500 plus pages. which married all the different conclusions from the earlier books and so on. So with that said, and then we got the 13 Steps to Riches book, which with Michael and I are in as well. So if you want to check that out, we're working on printing the 4th edition coming up soon. This is volume 3. So we got volume 4 coming out soon, and then 8 more with amazing influencers in the mindset/business finance space. So thank you folks again. And don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to all this as well. It'll be posted out to all the major podcast directories and of course YouTube very shortly. So thanks again, Mike. Thanks again, folks, and we'll see you on the next round. Bye now.
Great job. Great show, man.